Hello, Bloomington. I'm Mayor Tim Busse, and this is your Council Minute for the week of February 7th. On Monday night, Bloomington joined more than 30 cities across Minnesota by passing an ordinance regulating targeted residential picketing. In the past couple of years, we've seen an increasing number of community protests and demonstrations that occur in residential neighborhoods in front of the homes of public officials, public employees, and community leaders. We have seen it here in Bloomington, as well as other cities, most recently in Minneapolis. The balance here is tricky. On one hand is the desire to protect people and their rights to safety and privacy in their home, and on the other hand is the desire to protect the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression that protesters have. So the Bloomington legal team put together an ordinance regulating residential picketing that looks very similar to state law. The main difference is that under state law, targeted residential picketing is part of the definition of harassment, and it is a long and involved process for the victim, the person being harassed, to get a restraining order to stop the picketing. This ordinance is much more immediate. The ordinance makes findings or statements that this community believes to be true, things that I think we can all agree on. The findings state that residents of the city of Bloomington have a right to enjoy their home and to have a feeling of well-being, tranquility, and privacy. That picketing in front of someone's home causes emotional distress, can result in blocked sidewalks or roads, and can be considered harassment. The findings also state that there are plenty of other opportunities for picketers to exercise their constitutionally protected right of freedom of speech and expression. The specific language of the ordinance defines targeting residential picketing as marching, standing, patrolling, or other similar activities by one or more persons directed at a particular residential dwelling in a manner that adversely affects the safety, security, or privacy of an occupant of the dwelling, or doing those same activities in such a way that it prevents or hinders an occupant from accessing or exiting their property, basically blocking the driveway, the sidewalk, or the road. Violating the ordinance is a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 90 days in jail or a $1,000 fine, or both. While people may disagree about precisely which activities adversely affect the safety, security, or privacy of an occupant, the law has long recognized the right to feel safe in your home. It's not hard to envision countless scenarios where a homeowner, a protester, and a police officer called to mediate a situation could see the gathering from their own perspectives. Police Chief Mike Hartley described some of the challenges last Monday night, and I understand those challenges completely. Enforcement will require good police work by our Bloomington Police Department. Balancing these competing constitutional rights is always complex. The courts have found these ordinances legal, and Bloomington's ordinance is similar to state law and to what other cities have already adopted. It sets specific standards, and it provides a bit of structure for both homeowners and for protesters. There was a lot of council discussion on this, and ultimately it passed on a 5-2 vote, so there wasn't complete unanimity on this. Speaking for myself, as someone who voted in favor of the ordinance, I think passing this makes an important statement. While the right to protest is essential to democracy, limits are necessary. Peaceful protest in a public space is one thing. A protest in front of a private residence shouldn't be accepted or tolerated. And I'm not just saying this because about 24 people protested at my home on a Saturday morning in October of 2020 for what these protesters continue to describe as a peaceful, constructive conversation. I can say from my perspective that it did not feel peaceful and constructive at the time. When protesters show up in front of someone's home, waving flags and banners, using a bullhorn, and carrying weapons, as this group did in front of my house, it did not feel to me and to my family that the goal was constructive conversation. It felt that the goal was intimidation and harassment. And I believe that to be true regardless of whose home we're talking about, whether it's my home, the home of a Bloomington school board member, or the home of one of the leaders of the Bloomington Patriots. Even if you think that community leaders are fair game, I don't believe that their families and neighbors should have to put up with that. I also believe that this type of protesting has a chilling effect on individuals considering a run for public office, or accepting a government job, or taking a leadership role in a community organization. The right to protest is essential to our democracy, but reasonable limits are necessary. Even the U.S. Supreme Court has held that the government may impose reasonable restrictions on the time, place, and manner of speech. The City Council passed an ordinance that is legal and reasonable. And everyone I've spoken to about this agrees that balance and discretion are absolutely necessary. They also agree that protests in front of private homes is not in alignment with Bloomington's values. There are certainly other options for protesters to make their views known in ways that don't threaten the safety, security, and privacy of our families and neighbors. Since 1995, Bloomington has required a time of sale inspection on all single-family and two-family homes being sold in the city. The official goal is to enhance the supply of safe, sanitary, and adequate housing and to prevent the deterioration of the overall housing stock in the city. The inspections have been done in a hybrid fashion, with home sellers being able to hire either city inspectors or private inspectors to do the work. Recently, staff brought to the City Council a proposal for changes to the system. We started the discussion on this ordinance change back on January 24th, and we continued it to allow for more time for engagement with inspectors, realtors, and residents. Staff first introduced this to the Council last November at a special City Council meeting. So, some background. The time of sale inspection program provides potential home buyers with information about the condition of a home and requires the seller to correct immediate hazards. Those hazards include things like an unsafe furnace or water heater, an overloaded or damaged electrical system, or issues with the structure like walls, windows, or the foundation, or even something as basic as a lack of smoke detectors. Now, an important related item here. In October of last year, the City Council adopted a time of sale energy disclosure. It's kind of a supplement to the time of sale inspection, but it focuses specifically on energy-related items like the efficiency of a furnace or air conditioner, or how well insulated a home is. It doesn't require any work to be done, but the inspection and report gives potential home buyers even more information about a home that they may be buying from an energy perspective. And it helps move forward the Council's priority for reducing our carbon footprint. The time of sale energy disclosure report requirement goes into effect on April 1st of this year. So when staff looked at existing data of the current time of sale program, and then also considered the implementation of the new energy inspection program, they came to the conclusion that the most effective and efficient approach would be to bring the entire inspection program in-house within the City of Bloomington Building and Inspections Division, while continuing to use private inspectors as needed. Well, why would they want to do this? Staff found inconsistencies in the way the hybrid program was set up, such as the independent inspectors setting their own fees, the timeliness of the reports being processed, and differences in the thoroughness of inspection reports between independent inspectors. In addition to better consistency, staff anticipates the change will streamline the process for everyone involved so that they will have to make one call and make one payment to only one entity. This change will also improve internal efficiencies because city staff will spend less time reviewing independent inspector reports, thereby saving time for the sellers and the buyers. Now, I mentioned that the Council first heard this item back in January. We held it over until this week and asked staff to provide more information to the groups that will be directly affected by this, particularly realtors and private building inspectors. Staff set up a Let's Talk Bloomington project page and loaded up all the documents and links that included all Council presentations on the issue, the draft of the ordinance, and a very good FAQ section. In just 2 weeks, the Let's Talk page had almost 300 visits. Staff also created a survey for the residents, inspectors, and realtors, and 76 people chimed in with their opinion. Finally, staff offered virtual information meetings, 2 sessions each for both inspectors and realtors. I really appreciate the constructive feedback that people offered on concerns like the number of inspectors who will do the work, the lack of an online or after-hours scheduling system, and an extra fee for inspections scheduled after regular business hours. I also appreciate that staff took that feedback and made changes to the proposed program. There was a lot of good Council discussion on this, and once again, there wasn't unanimity on whether we should do it. Ultimately, it passed. And my expectation here is that the time of sale home inspection program will not miss a beat in terms of timely service, professionalism, and consistency, and that Bloomington residents will not see any changes in service. That is only 2 items today, but it's more than enough for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, Bloomington.